Goedenavond allemaal. Fijn dat jullie inschakelen ook, nu op YouTube. Tenminste, ik hoop in ieder geval dat alles werkt. Ik kan het nu niet zien, maar ik ga ervan uit. I'm switching, I'm hearing myself. I think, so I'm hearing myself. Sorry, yeah, that's me. Welcome. I'm switching to English because we've got some international guests from Germany and from England, and I also think we got some guests viewing from abroad, also at least from Belgium, although they speak Dutch, and also from Germany and also from England, and I think also from across the ocean. Some people I know they wanted to have the link to the webinar as well. So what we're going to do this evening is something I'm really looking forward to. We've invited some people to share their work on how they responded to the pandemic, to the corona crisis, and also building on work that they've done before. Sort of like activating their members, teachers, researchers, which I find very inspiring. So I've heard some of them present, I've gotten to know some of them a little bit better, and I was really blown away by what they were saying. And I think a lot of teachers, researchers want to be in an environment where they are empowered and where the union is helping them. So that's what we're going to find out this evening. It's also something that we're looking for as the AOB. So it's translated as the Dutch General Education Union, de Algemene Onderwijsbond. And we're also looking for ways to activate our members, being a democratic, bottom-up, mass movement organization where we can really sort of like empower ourselves and advocate for our profession. So these are sort of the questions that we want to explore. So how have we had these unions responded, our colleagues responded during the pandemic, where we also will look into where they were coming from, how they responded to the pandemic, and probably later during the sort of like the panel discussion that we're having, what's ahead. So what are the challenges? And I think there are loads coming out of the pandemic. So what are some good things that we take away from what we hear tonight and where they see themselves going? And I think we can also share where we hope that our union is going and where our profession in the Netherlands is also going. So we got a really, really good panel tonight. First up, there's going to be two colleagues from the National Education Union, Ellie Sharp, and I've heard her present in a webinar from Education International. And she was really fired up, and I thought, well, that's someone that lots more people have to hear. So, primary school teacher from London, school rep, if I'm not mistaken. So you can correct me later on if I'm wrong. John Haggerty, he's head of training from the National Education Union, and I've been getting to know him a little bit better as well. All the strategies that they're pursuing, and well, when he told me what they were doing the last couple of months during the pandemic, and on the schools opening and the campaign, I was really, really impressed by the depth and the engagement of their members. We also got Lisa Lewin. I hope I say the last name correctly, Lisa. She's a research assistant from the University of Dresden. And active in the Junge GEW, so the young department from the German Union, German Education Union. And my name is Jammer Evers. I'm vice president of the AOB, a history teacher. Trudy Kerperin, she will also introduce herself a little bit later as well. I think she's our international secretary, and she'll be sort of like moderating with Lisa. And we've got Philip, and he's our well, it says here negotiator and organizer. And I think he's one of our digital organizers as well. So he's really doing really good work on the digital front. And he's also moderating and helping us getting this webinar together. So thank you for that, Philip. And with that, I think I would like to ask John and Ellie to take over. And before we go there, the way we've set this up is that you can ask questions during or through the YouTube live chat. So you can ask there. We'll monitor that. I'll try to see if Twitter, if it doesn't work, you can also sort of respond directly to me to Twitter, but try to do it through YouTube. And well, with that, I'd like to give the floor to John and Ellie. I'm not sure who's going first. You've decided on that. And after their presentation, we're going to do a Q&A where we can have questions from the audience. Maybe Lisa has questions. I know I have lots of questions. And then Lisa will take over for about 15 minutes for a gateway presentation, and then also Q&A. And then we'll see how much time we have left for sort of like a general looking ahead kind of conclusion. Yeah, so that's it for me from the beginning. We're here to listen to our colleagues from England. So John, Ellie, can I ask you to take over from me?
Cool. Right, I believe I'm first, and then I'm going to pass over to John. So I think it's important that we kind of start at the beginning of this. So amidst Boris Johnson bragging about shaking hands with COVID patients and sharing how he thinks that school closures would do more harm than good, and when literally the rest of Europe, schools were already ground to a halt, the National Education Union was spreading their strong, clear and consistent message of closing schools as soon as possible, other than that for key worker children and those are more vulnerable. School was a very weird place at the time. My year 5 class of 9 and 10-year-olds was dwindling in numbers. Many staff weren't in school because they were classified as vulnerable. And I spent most of the day with about 7 children in my classroom, washing our hands all the time. We were on edge for weeks, and everything else in the UK seemed to be closing down around us, and the whole of Europe was already in total lockdown. Schools eventually closed with a day's notice, and only 8 days after Johnson's more harm than good message. And I think that's when the union really started taking hold. The next fight in schools was around expectations of staff. There was a total disregard for safety for many workers. And after a nudge in the right direction from my own union group, my school were able to encourage our head to take a sensible approach, and staff were asked if they were willing to be on a rota, and the rota was very minimal. And in the end, we only had about 7 children out of 600 coming into school. And this quickly became the norm for many schools after a really strong push from the union supporting school-based representatives to take action in their own schools. So I did my own little stint on the rota and quickly realised, as I'm sure many other colleagues in other countries, it's very impossible to keep children socially distanced. And amongst all of this, the NEU had developed 5 tests for the government to meet based around testing, social distancing, around those who are vulnerable, and a kind of like wider national plan. These tests were more than fair and achievable and were backed by other unions and politicians. However, they required transparency from the government, which is something that I feel is currently against their better nature. So at the time, we also began to hear murmurings of a wider reopening from many politicians on the basis that the attainment gap between our most disadvantaged pupils and their peers was growing wider, and a return to schools was therefore necessary. And this was also backed further by comparing our own situation to what was happening in Denmark. I think this rhetoric is completely obsolete when you take into account the policies that have left 4.2 million children in the UK living in poverty, which is about 30% of the children in our schools. And a return to schools wouldn't magically make that attainment gap disappear. It's been around for a long time and will need fundamental change in policy around housing, a living wage, universal credit, job security, which in turn will then support these families and children. On top of this, Denmark's situation is very different to our own. We have some of the smallest classrooms and the largest class sizes in Europe, and the unions in Europe played a crucial part in their planned reopening. So then we're moving on a little bit of time now. We've had just these key worker groups in, and then came an announcement a week after England had the highest death toll in Europe. Schools were to be reopened for nursery, reception, year 1 and year 6 on the 1st of June. The NEU immediately released a survey. Within 2 hours had 49,000 responses, with an overwhelming majority saying that they felt very unsafe to go back to school at this time. By this time, we'd increased our workplace rep density immensely and had over 2,000 new reps in schools, which left us at a huge advantage and strength in workplace organising. There were Zoom calls for officers, Zoom calls for reps, members that shared the same clear and transparent message of how to organise in your workplace around a wider reopening. We had actually a Zoom meeting that had a staggering 20,000 members on, which I think is probably one of the largest trade union meetings in a very long time at least. And all of this communication empowered our members and tooled them to be able to act in their workplaces. So the NEU then, alongside other unions, developed a checklist which took the flimsy and unrealistic government guidance much further. And this practical tool could be used in the workplace to ensure that it was as practically safe as it could be when reopening began. I know in my own school, we built a WhatsApp group and were sharing information all the time. And we're being critical of our own school's planning throughout. And we got together and we used the checklist to ensure that our own workplace was as safe as possible and raised any issues we had with the policy and the planning. So I think the next big hurdle that kind of came and was kind of seen throughout was the science. Time and time again, the government refused to share its targets with us of what was needed to have that wider reopening. And they avoided sharing the science for fair review and criticism, which I think is far from a big ask, to be honest. We saw the government's scientific advisory group report, which effectively said that children were no more likely to transmit than adults, but also no less likely. And as we all know, children are appearing to be asymptomatic in many cases, which essentially creates institutional amplifiers, as children will go unnoticed and track and trace won't happen until the virus is far more widespread within schools. So it's important to note also that school reopening plan from the government was not even based on its own scientific advisory group's models. So they just went about it in their own way. And at the same time as this SAGE report, an independent SAGE shared its own report stating that reopening on the 1st of June in the UK was categorically unsafe. We didn't have track and trace fully implemented. I'd probably argue that it still isn't. And pushing even the reopening back by 2 weeks to the 15th of June would actually halve the risk. So in my own school, we spoke to my head teacher to try and push back the reopening to the 15th on the grounds of the science that was shared. And although actually in my own school, we weren't successful, but we were able to push back a week, and then we had a staggered reopening from there of different year groups. And we did feel more confident in the fact that my school had gone above and beyond not only the government guidance, but actually the NEU's checklist. So we did feel that it was safe as it could possibly be. And I think this kind of takes us to present day within the school system. It's in complete disarray, but one thing I can say is that the NEU is really organised and is really leading the way, despite what many media outlets and politicians may say. So I'm now going to hand over to John to speak a little bit more in depth about how the union organises itself before I kind of share our aims for the future.
So hopefully you can see a set of slides, and all I want to do is to give a little bit of context. So I think Ellie's given a really useful view from the chalk face, if you like, from the classroom, from the view of members, and we are a rank and file led union. What I'm going to do is try to put it into a little bit of context and a few facts and figures, if you like, and then Ellie's going to round off with where we go in the future. So just to explain, the NEU is a new union. We are the result of a merger between two different unions in 2018. Within both organisations, the whole idea of organising and rank and file organising has been a contested concept. It's been a 10-year project of trying to win the union to a position that's about empowering rank and file reps rather than the union being led by full-time bureaucrats. So the project has involved a full-time team of organisers who have been deployed in our regions around the country, but being part of a national team. And the core part of that work has been identifying and developing workplace representatives, workplace activists, finding activists, and supporting them through a national training programme, and trying to build new cadres of leadership within the union. And a core part of that work has been a focus on equality and diversity, and trying to make the union look like its members, which 10 years ago, in terms of its leadership and its active members, it didn't. So what did we do during the crisis itself? Ellie's given you a really good overview of what happened in her school and in London. So we began with what were called town hall meetings, phone-in meetings, where members could phone in. And the one just before the school lockdown, we had 2,000 members phoning in to a phone town hall. Now that technology in the end sort of outgrew its usefulness. And we then moved to a system called Call Hub, where the ambition was to phone every single one of our workplace representatives. So we made over 10,000 phone calls during a 3-week period, and we had over 3,000 conversations with workplace representatives, trying to get representatives to set up groups with their members, WhatsApp groups or Zoom calls, and set up bargaining processes with their principals, with their schools, with their employers. We also managed a national petition around keeping our schools safe. And that was a really important part of broadening out the campaign to the wider community to try to get as many people involved. And that got over 300,000 signatures. We then started moving towards an online training program, training as many people as we could. So we were recruiting thousands of new representatives. So a briefing for all of those. We ran a training program for all representatives in what work they should be doing in their workplaces. We also ran a program of health and safety training, specifically focusing around risk assessment and the legal rights of representatives. We then moved to preparing for schools to be opening. We knew that at some point the government would move to open schools more widely. So we produced a letter that we wanted members to sign and give to the head or the principal to say, these are our demands over school opening. And it was interesting. Immediately we started getting a response from our reps saying, we've got members who are too scared to sign this. So it became what you'd call in organising a structure test. Where is our strength? Where is our power? How do we have organising conversations with people to win them to take that risk to sign that letter? Ellie's talked about the 5 tests that we developed at a national level. We had checklists for reps and members to use to determine whether the workplace was safe. We set up a whole load of Zoom calls, and that one on the 18th of May is the one that Ellie's mentioned, 20,000 members on a Zoom call. We think it's a record somewhere. And we've now developed, and Ellie's going to touch on this at the end, what we think we should do now. What's a national recovery plan for education? So those are the 5 tests. Here are the checklists. We started to pick up the information about staff at higher risk. Those are staff who are clinically more vulnerable, but also looking at the data, we were realizing that black teachers were at significantly higher risk. So we produced a particular checklist for staff who are at higher risk and focusing on the needs of our black members. So what were some of the outcomes of the whole process? We've recruited over 20,000 new members in the last 3 months. So we've gone to, we are now a union that's got over 450,000 members. We recruited 3,000 new reps. The day that the Prime Minister announced that schools were going to open, we had 500 people within 2 hours volunteer to be a rep. We've trained somewhere around 3,000 people in courses, but we're already rolling out a new set of trainings for the next 2 or 3 weeks. June the 1st, which was when schools were supposed to open more widely, only 30% of those schools did open more widely. And in those 30% of schools, only 20% of the students attended. So it was quite clear that our work had had an impact, that schools had not done what the government had asked them to do. Now, the 1st of June was part of a broader, wider opening that the government were wanting. And by the 9th of June, the government then abandoned those plans to open more widely. Our campaign had managed to stop our members being put at risk, and more importantly, the danger of community spread had been managed. We'd managed to avoid that by forcing the government to abandon that wider school opening. And what we're looking at now is what we think the government should adopt as a recovery plan, and that's part of where do we go now as an organisation. So what I'm trying to do is, there we go, back to Ellie, who's going to hopefully finish off with where do we go now, as a huge helicopter goes overhead.
So I think going forward, my role as a rep and reps in schools is to kind of uphold all the work that we've done to ensure our schools remain safe as possible and to not let those standards slip when the pressure starts to mount. And as John said, we've developed a 10-point plan which will help guide that wider reopening and guide our workplace activity. So firstly, we need to recognise that disadvantaged children and young people and their families must be key priority. They can't become casualties of COVID, and children and young people living in poverty and low-income households must be given the resources they need to learn at home, including access to books and creative resources, as well as technology. On top of this, free school meals for these children should continue throughout the whole of the summer holidays, so these children don't go hungry. And that's something actually I believe the government has now pledged to do. We want to see local authorities funded to make summer holiday clubs offer to be given to children and young people. And this is to build their confidence for a successful return in September, as many of these children may not have been in school for the last 6 months. We want to see public buildings such as libraries, sports halls and religious buildings used to expand the space that schools have, so we can actually achieve social distancing further. School exams and testings have to be changed to provide a fair assessment on young people's attainment. Exams can't be expected to cover the current syllabus because of the reduced teaching time. And primary school testing should just not take place. They're mainly used as an accountability measure and will not be comparable to previous and subsequent years anyway. A fully resourced national plan for children's well-being should be launched to support children who have suffered trauma in this pandemic, and students' well-being must be placed at the centre of how we adapt education to meet the needs of children and young people. And I mean, among all this, I felt empowered by the staggering amount of educators joining the union. I mean, 20,000 plus members is such a huge feat. And it appears that many of those members are young and under the age of 35. And over the years, trade unionism in education has been lost to many that are new to the profession without them understanding the strength in what trade unions have achieved and can achieve for us. This pandemic has politicised educators on a mass scale. They're beginning to recognise the purpose of the union to protect and act as a collective voice for change. People have seen that we have strength in numbers now. We've also seen the build of grassroots activism in networks. I personally chair a young teachers network in London. We've had large engagement with our communications, which includes supporting each other in school-based activity via WhatsApp and Zoom, whilst also continuing our political education activity by bringing it online. I've learned how communication is vital for organising. The use of technology has opened up opportunities for future organising in ways we've never previously thought. It has been trade union activity accessible to so many people, and that's just the start. So fundamentally, the NEU has shown strength and determination at every corner, and it's built its strength off the back of standing firm in its values, having a core and consistent message, being transparent and reflective in its communication, empowering members to engage and be the change. I think this pandemic has gone to show how unions really are the only avenue to keep workers, and in this instant also children and their families, safe. The power we have built moving forward is going to be a huge catalyst for change in the education system in the UK. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. And John, of course. I already heard you speak, so I was impressed and inspired, and I want to hear so many teachers talk like this, and so many of our colleagues talk like this. And then, if that sense of collective voice, power, we can achieve so much. So I hope it inspires a lot of teachers in the Netherlands as well. People are listening. So there's a couple of questions coming in, and I've got one of my own as well, and maybe it's for both of you. So what we found is that there was a huge disagreement on how to proceed during the pandemic. So some of our colleagues wanted to keep the schools open. So they didn't want to hear anything about closing schools, children first. And there were quite a few colleagues also who said, well, you have to close the schools immediately. And our stance was we're following the science. So what our national science organization is telling us. So we were less in a conflict mode than you were. And I think our government handled the pandemic a lot better as well. But how did you know the extent of the differences of opinion amongst your colleagues in the school, but also at the union level?
Do you want me to start, John?
Go on then, yeah.
I think it's really interesting. Sorry, I can hear myself. I think it's because maybe John's mute. I don't know. It's weird. I think that essentially the media portrayed teachers to kind of be these lazy people who just wanted to stay home and do nothing, which I found really difficult, because actually a lot of teachers, if they weren't in school, they were actually at home doing loads of online learning and supporting children as they went. I think when reopening was announced, we had 49,000 people answer a survey in 2 hours. I think you can't deny how big that is. And the overwhelming, it was definitely over 90% said they just didn't feel safe with that. And I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that the government time and time again didn't meet its own targets. And we saw thousands of people in the carer industry pass away from COVID due to the lack of PPE and many other things. And I think that the government was therefore not trusted. We also had a petition where I think it was I think John mentioned it was over 400,000 people signed the petition in support of the NEU's 5 tests. So I think we knew we had overwhelming support, but it didn't mean that we weren't confronted by the media time and time again with this kind of idea that we were lazy and we didn't want to be in school and all of those things. But I think our message clearly shone through with the support that we kind of got in the end.
I think just to add to that, I agree with all of that. I think I mentioned earlier, this has been a 10-year project. That I think if this crisis had hit the union 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been in such a strong position in terms of being rooted in our members, being rooted in rank and file organising, in being focused on the workplace. And I think that's the move within the union over the last 10 years, to really try to put faith and trust and confidence in our workplace representatives, empower them as much as possible. So that what was happening was we were listening to what members on the ground were saying. We were running Zoom calls and listening to what members were saying. And it was quite clear that members they wanted to keep teaching the children, but they recognised that it was not safe. And so all the way through, because we've changed the union into that much more of a rank and file workplace oriented structure, that then meant that it was much easier to listen to our members, to engage in our members, for our members to tell us what they felt. So we could put a survey out and get 49,000 responses because our members are used to being consulted in that sense. We could put training out to reps and straight away had hundreds and hundreds of reps signing up to be trained because they're used to that sort of communication between the centre and with them. So we didn't have huge disagreements. I mean, there are disagreements, but they've been quite open and transparent. People have debated those things. But I think that the direction of travel has been led by the members, and we've responded to that rather than being led from the top.
Yeah, and I think like the main difference is where you are right now is that you're already sort of like organized at the base more than we have. Sort of like our school reps network needs to be developed more, and I think you've already passed that stage already. So our surveys are done are usually we've got sort of high response rates. That's how we also know how we should respond and what our colleagues are thinking. But sort of like that next level that you can also sort of like build on that infrastructure that you got in the schools. That is something I think that we're looking towards reactivating again.
But it's a process. We're not perfect.
Yeah.
We're nowhere there. We haven't achieved it, but we're on the way to achieving it.
So you're on the way to sort of like what the Chicago Teachers Union, sort of like the kind of level of so
interestingly, we've invited the Chicago teachers over 3 or 4 times. We've met with them. We've sent people over to work with them. So those links between us and American teacher unions are stronger as we try to learn from the best, both in America and in Europe.
Well, that's why we invite you to learn from the best. So I think there's two and I'm not kidding. I think there's 2 questions that I'm turning into one from Jeroen and Marja. So that teachers and of course also education support personnel became members. Was that due to the union or the pandemic? So it's like so what was the trigger for? There was a mass sign-up, like in the tens of thousands, and also 3,000 school reps. That's massive. So what was sort of like the trigger? And in a couple of days.
So shall I give a national perspective, and then Ellie maybe talk about what it's like on the ground? Teaching, in terms of teachers, is quite highly unionised. Although the way we recruit has been damaged in the last few years because half of all training teachers don't train in universities, they train direct in the school, and that makes our recruitment of them a bit more difficult. But as a union, we don't just recruit teachers, we recruit all education workers, and our union density amongst support staff is much, much lower. Our density amongst teachers is 95, 96% across. We're not the only union that organises teachers, but across all the teacher unions, it would be around the 90%. But for support staff, much, 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 much lower. So those 20,000 who've joined, a good third of those are support staff. So support staff have been joining us because they've recognised they need to be in a union. And there are other unions they can join, but joining us has been because we've been really visible. So it's been very much members joining us. We haven't launched big recruitment strategies. We haven't had particular recruitment campaigns. I mean, at one point, our recruitment system crashed 2 or 3 times in the night because so many people were trying to join. We were simply trying to respond to the demand rather than particularly running recruitment campaigns at the time. I don't know what it was like on the ground for you.
I think it's really interesting because where everything was so uncertain, it was just like things were being dropped all the time by the government with like little to no notice. It was like, oh, by the way, schools are closing tomorrow. Deal with that. And it was just this like kind of like joke that all schools were kind of manically trying to organise in complete unknown. And I think that therefore we started to hear actually in comparison to this government's kind of messy message, the union was really clear and consistent throughout, and it felt like a hub of kind of like, oh, this is where I go because the messaging is clear, I'm being listened to, they know what they're talking about, and it was from the get-go. And I think therefore people kind of gathered around that, and when they started to see people doing things in workplaces, naturally people started to come on board. And when that 1st of June reopening was announced, I think people were shocked because the government was going against its own guidance. It was going against its own logic. And I just think people were like, I need to get on board with this. And especially as the union, as John said, was so visible at this point with the same, I can't stress it enough, clear and consistent message. So yeah, I think that really drew people in.
I think, to misquote the film, if you build it, they will come. We didn't do a recruitment drive people saw the union was a fighting option. They realised that that's the thing to do. So rather than us going out and persuading people with offers or insurance policies or a nice badge, which you get all of those things, they were joining us because they could see the purpose of being in a union and having a strong collective voice in their workplace, and that's really important. Yeah.
So I'm not big on trinkets either. So I think it's all about collective power, and I think a lot of people respond to that, especially in these but you already had the infrastructure in place where people could sort of like really easily get into the union. And I think that's for us, that's a very important lesson. I've got one from Marijtje. She's in our university sector, so we're covering all the sectors. She says, so how do these bigger Zoom calls relate to more one-on-one meetings, maybe with your organizers and your school reps or with members? Did that take place? Because here we find it really hard to sort of having these old-fashioned organizing conversations in schools. So how did that work? And then I think that's the last one we'll take now, and then we'll have some options later because we also have to have Lisa.
So shall I tell you what was supposed to happen at a national level, and Ellie can tell you what actually happened. The idea was that we were trying to build all the way through. So the call hub work was ringing reps and telling reps, we need you to set up a Zoom call or a WhatsApp group with your members. So we were giving asks of all the reps. We were asking them to do things. Then we would do smaller Zoom calls with groups of reps in different towns or regions to say, we need you to do this. And then the next thing we need you to do is to sign up to the next Zoom call. So we would keep making asks of our reps rather than say, and they were quite tough things. We were saying, go and meet your head, to make demands of your employer. So we weren't letting them off with just signing a petition. We were asking them to step up. So by the time we had no idea that the Zoom call was going to be that big. On the day we started thinking we might hit 10,000. Then as people were logging on, we were messaging each other going, blimey, this looks like it's getting to 12, then 14. So we had no idea it was going to be that big, but we had built all the way to it. It wasn't a one-off. It was part of a strategy, if you like. I don't know if that's how it felt on the ground.
Yeah, I think that all the Zoom calls we had gave people confidence in what they were saying. They knew their stuff. They knew what they were talking about because they had been given that same message and they were hearing that message time and time again, which built their confidence to do those tricky asks, such as speak to their head or step up as a rep and get a group together. And I mean, the one thing I've learned in this pandemic in terms of organising is the absolute fundamentals behind communication. It's less about what you do in terms of what you succeed in. You know, we focus a lot on have you been able to get your head to do this or is your school doing that? But actually, the fundamentals of just talking to people in your school all the time, the network I have across London, speaking to other schools, hearing what is happening, and that communication is what is the fundamentals of organising. And if you have those relationships with different people, you're prepared to take action together and feel a lot more supported and knowledgeable in doing that. So I think that kind of fostering of relationships and communication between people is what really worked here. And I think, the NEU with the information it was given gave people the confidence to have those communications.
And one thing I would just add, we had a really clear moral message. One of the things the General Secretary said on one of the big Zoom calls, and he repeated it on a number of calls, and he would talk to the reps, the reps on the call and said, there are people who are alive today who would not be thanks to you. Oh, wow, that's a big thing to say to people. And that really did make people think, I'm doing the right thing. I will keep doing this because the leader of the union says I'm doing the right thing and my members are saying I'm doing, and that's a huge joined up message, but that's a powerful message to give to someone who's just volunteered that week to say I'll be your representative, and you're the head of the union says you are saving people's lives. That's a big thing to say to them.
Definitely. Yeah, so what I'm hearing is sort of like this deepens and strengthens the bonds, even though it's also what you're doing is also digitally. It's also a way of also connecting to, Hey, I think there are more questions, but we also have Lisa coming up, and we have sort of like the last bit also reserved for like a panel discussion, and Lisa probably has some questions for you as well. But I could do this sort of like an hour more. So I think I want to ask you back sometimes, also to talk to more of our reps. But let's move over to Lisa, and Trudy is going to introduce Lisa and why we asked the GAW. And the only thing I'm going to do is click on the presentation because it's going to be shared through my screen. Right, Trudy?
Yeah, I'm there. So Jelmer can sit back for a moment and check what we are doing. So he introduced me already, and Lisa, in fact, so I don't want to do that again. What I just want to say is that GAW is a long-standing partner of the AOB. And I was aware that there was a very large young GAW conference coming up. But what I heard was it was a conference of several days, and suddenly, because of the COVID-19 situation, it had to be turned around into something digital. Many others that had conferences or congresses planned, they just canceled them or postponed them. But GAW didn't do that. So there was a kind of team formed that was already preparing this Junge GAW conference. And I was very, very curious to know how that would turn out, because in a regular conference, it's not only the content that's important, there's also the social contacts, building your network, learning from others outside the formal part. So I think they managed to do it. So tell us about it, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know if the screen is sharing, if everything all right, because I don't see it. So if everything is working, I could start. Yeah, great. Yes. Yes. Okay, then I start. At first, I would like to say thank you to you for the opportunity to talk about this conference, because it was a really exciting thing, and I learned a lot of things in this time in the last 3 months, and I'm really happy to share it with you and maybe inspire you with these things. On the next slide, you can see what I want to talk about today. At first, I just want to say a few things about the Junge GAW, who we are, just to get it in context. Then I would say some words about the Givolution in general, because the Givolution this year was the 3rd conference we organized at the Junge GAW. And the biggest part in this presentation is my report about the Givolution this year, our first digital conference. So at first, some things about the Junge GAW. Yes, we are, maybe that's really clear, but I just want to tell you again, and all the people who are watching this, we are union members between 18 and 35 years, and in Germany, that's a really high range of people. When we look at the age, most of the unions, the youth groups are between 18 and 27. Sorry, 27. And we had members around different working fields, like students, young teachers, and social workers. And so our members, they all have a different point of view of the topics, like the education and the working condition in schools or something like this. And yes, we want to change our society to be more fair. I think that's, we all have in common. And we want to focus on the education and working conditions of our young members, and represent them in like youth committees or union committees, or in political decisions which are made. And we also organize events for members and non-members to discuss, to network, to exchange experience, to connect them. Yeah, that's the basic things. And now something about the Gevolution in general. The first youth conference we organized was in 2012. The second one was in 2016, and this year was the third one. And each conference was organized by a group of young members of the GEW, which were more or less active, because there is no need to be active to organize this conference. This is the whole thing of this conference, because we think and we also learn that the organization of an event is a really good thing to get in contact with active members and to get the motivation to be an active part of the union, because you can make decisions and you can, organize an event in the form you want it to be, and you share your experience, and that's a really good way to activate people, to activate members. Because in the youth conference, everything is going to be decided by the project group. The content, the workshops, the speakers, and something like this. And the group doesn't belong to one of our committees. So we report to these committees and tell them, we decided to do this, and we want to talk about this and this topic. But the group made every decision. And about the goals the Gevolution had, every Gevolution had, is or are 4 things. It's organizing, exchanging, networking, and talk about issues. Because if you want to organize your members, if you want to activate your members, you have to create spaces and the possibilities to talk about different ways to do this. And we also learned that it's a really good thing when active members share their experience through our federal states, across the borders of our federal states, because every state have different ways to do this and different solutions, and sometimes they are good and sometimes they are not that good. And if they talk about this, they can develop a new way, and that's what the Gevolution tries to offer our members, to share their experience and to talk about and to discuss in new ways. And one of the important things is that we try to connect active and non-active members. So on every Gevolution, we want to that non-active members can participate at this conference, and we connect them to other active members, because that's a really good way to motivate them. And we do this with different kinds of formats. These, I think you already know these formats. I don't want to say so much about this. I just want to say something about the open formats, because we choose. No, can you go back, please? Yes, thank you. The open formats, we decide to offer them at the conference because we. Every project group is really different, and there are so many different people, and every one of them has their own ideas and their own issues, their own topics they want to talk about. But we don't have everything in mind maybe our members want to talk about. So this is a kind of space we offer them to say, we don't know what you want to talk about, and if we forgot something, here's the possibility you can talk about this. And I think that's a really important decision we made, that we choose this kind of format also to offer at our conference. Now I want to talk about the Gevolution this year. Here you see a picture of our project group. I have to say that I really love this group, and they are really great people. It was really inspiring. They are awesome. I just love them. Now if I see them again. Yes, we started the organization of the conference last year in February. So on this point, we didn't think of the option that we have to do this conference completely digital. We don't think about this, so we just start to plan this conference like a normal conference. We want to have the conference like for 4 days and with over 30 workshops and discussions and guests and concerts and everything you can imagine a youth conference could have. In December, we already finished our program. We had our logo, we had the title. So when this year the Corona crisis started, we had a really big problem. So maybe the next picture is maybe like a picture how we felt at this moment. It's from the conference, but I think it's a really good picture how we feel, because the penultimate meeting on March was already a digital meeting, and we're just like, oh no, what we have to do. So maybe on the next slide, there's also I try to put some picture in. Yeah, that's me on the conference. Maybe you can see it. And we were forced to cancel the conference. We had the need to cancel the conference because for us it was really clear that there's no other way. We can't do this conference as we planned it, and we had to discuss what we need to do, because our feeling was that it's not the right decision to don't do anything, just to cancel the conference, and there's no replacement for this. We thought that that would be the wrong decision, and so we decided to digitalize it. You see on the next slide, that's our staff members, Stefan and Stefanie from the GEW, who supports us in many different ways, thanks to them. And when we decided to do a digital conference, we had to ask us some questions. What does this mean to us? You see on the next slide. Yes, thank you. And it means that we had to rethink our program, because it was really clear that we can't do the conference as we plan it in the digital way. So we have to reduce the things we want to offer. For example, we planned the conference to be over 4 days, and now we reduce it for 2 days. So just from just on Saturday and Sunday. And try to focus on the essential things, on the things we think which are important, but we want to do something. And it was also clear for us that we need professional support, especially for the technical solutions, because we are expert at issues about, education, and about questions how we can include all the people, but we weren't expert about things how we do a live stream, or how we do a program, a software we need to use. So that's the point where we ask people to help us. And I think the most important thing, and I'll say something later about this, is that we don't have to be afraid. I think that's a really important message, that in everything we do, we don't have to be afraid about things we don't know yet, because we can learn, and it's okay to make mistakes. And maybe that's the important thing, the main thing I've learned when we planned this conference, this digital conference, to make mistakes and to learn from them, and that's okay. Yes, and our solutions, no, that's the next one, I'm sorry. What was important for us, we realized that the goals for this conference didn't change when we think about a digital conference. The idea of the conference is still the same. So we want to create a place where the people can discuss, where the people can connect to each other. We want a conference where is a content where workshops are offered, and where you also have the opportunity to have like fun activities, like a quiz or a movie night. And we want a conference which offers the possibility to talk about current social issues. The thing which is new and which a new thing we have to talk about and what's important for us is that we need to find a technical solution for like over 140 participants to be active. And that's our solution in short. We had a communication platform, MetaMost, it's like Slack, if you know this. Our webinar tool was Big Blue Button. We chose it because these both are open source programs, and we also use live streams for the big formats like the panel discussion or big lectures or something like this. And important to say is that everything happens in MetaMost. So the members go on MetaMost, they registrate there, and everything happens there. The links for the meetings and the calls and also the live stream, everything was in MetaMost to make it as easy as we could for them. Yes, and the next slide. Yes, I tried to go through it really quick. The conclusions after the conference. What worked and what didn't work when we have a look on our goals. That's the next slide. Yes, the goal to offer our members a space or the possibility to exchange and to talk about things we could achieve, I would say, because we had over 180 interested members of the GEW who wants to take part at the conference, and over 140 people were active at this conference. And they were also active in the open formats. So there happened a lot on MetaMost, and there were a lot of people who participate in the workshops and in the lecture and communicate during the live stream in the chat at MetaMost. So I think that was a really good idea and showed us that yes, in a digital conference, you don't have this real interaction with other people, but it's another way. And especially in a crisis, there's the need to offer them the opportunity to talk to each other and to share experience and to talk about things you have in mind. What doesn't work is, like technical problems. I think that's normal, that we don't know if they connect. If there is the connection between active and non-active members, because that's a thing we can't see. They had the option in MetaMost to do this and to write like private messages to different people and something like this, but we don't have like a clue where we can see what happened there. Yeah, if you know what I mean. Yes, and what we learned. That's the last thing, and then I want to show you a short video at the end. And that's are the important things for us or for me, for my work in the union, is of course there is no real replacement for a real conference. You can't replace a real conference in a digital way, but in a crisis where this is the only option you have to do something for your members, it's the only way. So you have the responsibility to do this because they need it, and they need, and John and Ellie said this before, they need to see that you are a group of people who knows what to do and who don't be afraid in this crisis, and to say, hey, we know that's a challenging time and we all struggle, but we are there and we offer you something, and we offer you also the possibility to talk about things which are going on besides the crisis. And we afraid, but we do this. Yes. And so you can, I think there's always a way to achieve the goals, and there's every time a way to do what you want to do. And if you make mistakes, that's okay. That's part of the process. Yes, that's short from me. Thank you very much. And now I have, Jelma is playing a short video. If we have the time, I'm sorry. Yes, it's our after movie from the conference. I hope you enjoy it.
Geen geluid? Oké. System audio.
Jelmer, does it work? If you want more time, I can try to, I can ask some questions that came in.
Yeah, I think we need to share it. I don't think I can get the sound up. We'll do that later. I'll share it later.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, well, too bad, because it's a very inspiring little movie where you really see the dynamics of this conference. But, well, as Jelmer said, we can share it later. It is in German, so but I think it's not a problem for most of you. You will understand by looking at the images and the emotions that come from it. I was very, very inspired by it. So I've seen some questions coming in. For example, I have a question coming from Hilde, who says, what triggers young teachers and staff to join GEW? And maybe the question attached to it, did the conference play a specific role also in recruitment?
Yes. The first question, what triggers young teachers to join the GEW? I think there are different different things why people join us. One thing is like, Julie, maybe you have to translate it, like Versicherung, insurance.
You have it.
Yeah, right. Like an insurance, but there are also people, especially if they joined the GEW during their university time, to talk about the working conditions and issues they see in the education, like inclusion or something like this, and they want to fight for them. Also, if they're not in school yet, but they see it's necessary for them, and they see the responsibility to fight for it because it's important to change our society. And the conference plays a really big part for the GEW in this process, because what I said before is that we try to connect active and non-active members, because we learned that this is one of the best ways to activate non-active members, and they stay active if they are connected to other people. And we also learned that if they get in contact with the GEW, when they can talk about social issues, working conditions, and we linked it to like union topics into our union work, the connection between the things they see and the things they want to change to the union is better if we just say to them, it's important to join the union because we fight for your working conditions, and then they're like, I don't know if that's important for me. So it's a really important thing. The thing with the conference is this conference is only for members to activate them, but we also offer like events where people can discuss different kinds of topics or get in contact with other people, which are open for non-active for people who aren't members at the GEW. what I think, and in the work I did, and the work or the things people do I know in the GEW, the organization or the organizing of an event like this or smaller events plays a really important role for activate members and to people join our union. Yes.
Thank you. There is another question that came from Marijtje. The only thing is that I don't know exactly when it came in, so I think she refers to activating members and connecting them. She said this works for recognizable groups at university, for example, like female professors network and others. But it's difficult to reach the difficult groups like people on fixed term contracts, researchers or university teachers. Is there any specific action that you undertake to reach out to difficult to reach groups?
The group which is difficult to reach for us aren't these kind of teachers at the university. It's more like social workers, because they're really the group they're in is really small, and they had so much work to do that sometimes it's really hard to activate them, especially because if you're a teacher in German and you are active in a union, there's a way to get like free time for your work. We call it Personalrat. I'm not sure. Yeah. So then you have like free time for your union work. And if you're a social worker, you don't have this chance, this opportunity to get this free time. We are thinking about ways to activate them, and we are try to find new solutions. But the youth, the GEW youth, focused on like student groups. That's like one of the most important parts for us, and also for me, because we made the survey like 3 years ago, where we asked our young members how they get activated and what motivate them to stay active at the GEW. And one of the things we saw at this survey was that the important group for us are the students. These are the group where they have the highest number of people who want to be active at the GEW. And it's not the young teachers, and it's also not the social workers. We have to focus on the students, because they are motivated, and if we get to them, maybe we can do more things. So we focus on these groups and not on these groups like teachers at the university, not as I am, more as with this fixed I forgot the word.
Fixed term contract.
Yes.
Short contracts, precarious contracts. Yeah. It's a choice. So
yes, of course it's a choice, and maybe it's not a good choice. I'm not sure. Maybe that's also a process in the union, and we have to discuss this every time why we choose a group over another. And also there are different groups of people who are active in the GEW, and each group decides where they want to work and which group they want to activate. Because we are not only focused on teachers, and that sometimes makes our work really, really difficult, because there are so different types of people we want to organize that it's really difficult to get them together and to find a way which fits for everyone. So we have to find many different ways.
Yeah, thank you. I see that John has a question. He came in, you see him. So John, what's your question?
It's more of a comment about precarious workers. So we have a particular group in our union of what we call supply teachers or substitute teachers. teachers who were employed to fill gaps. And they've been very difficult to organise. They've been very critical of the union as a group. They've been very loud in their criticisms. And we've tried to organise, they've organised their own networks, and we've tried to work with that network. But it was interesting during the crisis because, of course, when schools closed, they were left with no income at all. So we had to nationally and with the network try to help them negotiate furlough agreements with their agencies, which many of them managed to do. But it was a real crisis. And again, if they hadn't been organised and if they hadn't been critical of us as a union on a national level, I don't think we would have noticed it. So listening to a group that is critical and allowing them to self-organise has actually empowered them. I'm not saying we've got it right at all, and I think they would be quite critical of us, and as is their right. But I think understanding that and allowing them to self-organise has been quite important.
Yeah, I think this too, but in Germany, the situation is a little bit difficult because we also have these kind of teachers at school, but the GEW also organized them, and we also have the responsibility to be a union for them and to work for them because they are teachers. So we criticize how they get educated because that's really difficult. It's mostly it's not good. It's really bad. It's a really short time. They just have like a few months or to a year to learn all this stuff about how I do class and how do I organize courses and something like this. And it's a really short time. We study it like for 5 years, and they have like 1 year and have to work also. But we organize them and we fight for them. So this situation didn't happen at the GEW, but I think you're right. I think that to criticize a group and to organize can empower people. We can see it in other situations that the moment when people try to act together and to fight for something, they empower themselves because they do something together and they try to fight for better working conditions and something like this. So I think that's good. Maybe that's not every time is not the best way, but for the feeling to that you can do something and that you can achieve goals you want to achieve. It's one of a way you can do this.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I think the time has come to go to the larger discussion, and I will give the floor back to Jelmer.
Well, I think Ellie was going on, and I think she wanted to say something.
Okay, I thought it was fine.
I have a question for Lisa. It kind of links to the whole moving forward thing. I guess we're kind of coming to a point now where things might start to reopen and things like your conference might start to happen in person in maybe the next year. How are you going to incorporate what you've learned in terms of the technology that you've done along with going back to that face-to-face thing? Do you think that they can kind of come together and that be powerful? I'm interested to see how you can link the two.
Yeah, I think that's really hard because I think that the conference we planned is cancelled anyways. So because next year we have our big union day. I don't know if that's the right translation. And so maybe there isn't the chance to do this conference. I think in the future, maybe there is a way, and we have to think about this and we have to discuss how it could work, where we find a combination of different formats as of format of a real conference, and we add digital things to it, like to stream a panel discussion, or to think about how we can use webinars that some people can participate at the conference who maybe could take part at this conference if there aren't these digital formats. But in the next time, I think we can't do this because that's also one reason why we don't think about a real conference at all, is that I think maybe for the next year or 2 years, I'm not sure, there's every time the chance that or we have to think about that we exclude people from a real conference because they're vulnerable. Sorry, because they can get ill and because they are old or something like this. And I think we can't do this if we want to change our society in a better way and to include people in every form of society. And then we organize a conference where we exclude people because they can't participate in person at this. But I think that there are many ways to link them together, but I don't know yet how. And I'm also really looking forward to the solutions we can find. And what I didn't mention is that in September there's the next GEW conference, a small conference from the women in the GEW, and they decide to use the same technical solutions we chose for our conference, and also try to make a digital conference. And that's really cool for us because we see, okay, we do something and we inspire our union as a younger group, and now all the people try to do the same and aren't afraid anymore of doing this kind of conference, and that's really great. Yeah, but other things we will see.
Well, it sounds great. You paved the way for a lot of changes, probably.
Yeah. So and turning the question around, Lisa, and also for you, John, is that a sort of like a similar route you're taking? I mean, at least as far as we're concerned, yes, you definitely need to see each other face to face, especially if there's more like political discussions going on. But there's also lots of new people attending who are saying, well, this is like a phenomenal, I'm in a busy job. It's really hard to get to these face-to-face conferences or meetings, union meetings. So this for me works very well. So how do you see that going forward from your end?
Am I going, John, or do you want to go?
Yeah,
John?
you go first.
I think it's really interesting because you're right in saying that a lot of people don't attend union things and things like that because the workload that we have as teachers is extortionately high. I think there's kind of two ways you can look at this. Number one is that we have like a more blended system where we can also have online things along with face-to-face things and value communication in all ways. But I think the other way we can look at this is recognize the power that we currently have built from the pandemic. And I think we can't be under any illusions that my personal opinion is we weren't nearly as strong before the pandemic as we are now. And we're in a huge place of strength to actually make real structural changes within the education system, which will allow teachers to have that time. And we will hopefully be able to shift other things in the education system, such as testing. And we've seen a reverse on the primary baseline for 4-year-olds today or yesterday. And I think it's like that snowball effect of actually we're in a place of strength. We have a place that we can start to demand things now because we've shown that we know the route that's right to take. So I think, yeah, we've got two options there, or both. But yeah, I'd like to see us use this momentum to actually make further change, as well as having a more blended approach, which is more accessible to people with other disadvantages that means that they can't attend meetings. Yeah,
so what you're saying is also, it's not just a technical thing, it's also like the way you organize and empower each other, right? So sort of like that's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
So just to add on to that, I mean, we've been very clear that we haven't simply put our whole training program online. We've developed specific online training as an emergency response. For a start, our training courses are 2 or 3 days. We wouldn't do a Zoom training of more than about 90 minutes or so. I think that's the limit for how much people can really take. Also, our training is very much about building relationships, about discussing, and I think those are things that you can do on these calls, but they're more difficult. So in terms of the pedagogy, I'd be it's difficult to replace the face-to-face experience. We also, as trade unionists, have a legal right in our country to be released from work for trade union training. And already I'm hearing employers saying to reps, well, you don't need to do the training that you were going to do because you can just do this online in your own time. You don't need to go on the training course. So we have to be very careful to defend that. But at the same time, as Ellie has said, we are much stronger now because people have engaged in the work of the union through online systems. I know of union branches who would normally get 8, 12, 15 people to a meeting who've had 200, 300, 400 to an online meeting. And we mustn't lose that engagement, that involvement, that enthusiasm that members have shown in the work of the union. That's partly because the union has become important and relevant and a fighting organisation during the crisis. But the media for them to engage is something we've got to reflect on and look at how we make the most. I mean, Ellie talks about blending different systems, and I think those are the sorts of things that we've got to look at. But I see online it complements face-to-face. It doesn't replace face-to-face.
Just like in education, right? So you don't want to have I don't want to teach kids in front of a classroom. It's horrible. And I think that's the experience that people have all over the world. So it's like the value of face-to-face interaction and social interaction and actually being part of a physical community. So Lisa, I also had one question going forward, because you organized them on an open source platform called Mattermost. Yeah. So is that still in operation? Do you plan on expanding on that? Is that sort of like the start maybe of sort of like a union social network, or?
Yes, sadly not, because before we decided to do the conference or make a digital conference, there was our student group at the GEW who wants to implement also a digital platform to communicate. We call it Moodle. I don't know if this, like a learning management system. But Moodle wasn't already finished when we decided to make this digital conference, so we had to think about another solution, which is finished in the time we needed to be. And Moodle did this. It wasn't possible that Moodle is finished in the time we needed to be finished. One of our youth committee used it last weekend for their meeting, and it's online yet, but I think only till July, and then we have to close it because there is already a platform which we want to use, and then we transfer it or transfer the documents to Moodle. But I think what we showed is that a platform where you can communicate, where you can share information, and where you can get in contact is a good thing to stay in contact with each other, because everything is there. So you only have to log in on this platform, and then you can use everything. You can organize your groups, you can create new groups, and then you can, everything is in one place. I try to say that Mattermost for us, or Moodle, is like a school. Everything is there. It's a digital school. It's a digital building, and you can enter it, and then you have different rooms with different topics and different people, and that helps to stay in contact and to activate and to organize things. But sadly, it's not a Mattermost. I'm really a fan of Mattermost because it's really simple to understand. But Moodle has more options.
It's a proper learning management management system. Yeah, we were working with Education International, like our federation. We were thinking, wouldn't it be nice to organize our 32 million educators and researchers into one big social activist network? That would be a real powerhouse. So that we're still talking about that, so maybe we can get that. Maybe this is also like a catalyst.
really, really difficult, because to organize, like, I don't know, over millions of people on one platform, if there are more like 1,000 people online, so the server structure have to be really
it's
really, really good.
It was like a long term, and it would need involve like the GEW and the oude and the NEU would all need to be involved in sort of like setting something like this up. But it would be, I think, a powerful force. That's
yeah, of course.
We were ahead of our time when we were discussing this. I think we need to wrap up, and I could go on for like an hour, but it's late, and so we shouldn't. But I definitely want to continue this another time. But I also want to touch a little bit, maybe shortly, just on the pandemic. So what I'm seeing in the Netherlands is that the honeymoon is over. So people were clapping for our healthcare colleagues. They were respected and they're vital, and they were. They did sort of like a phenomenal job. I was like looking in awe in what they achieved the last couple of months. But now we're getting back. Everything is opening again. We're going back to normal. All the big multinationals are getting the money, and our healthcare colleagues are left in the dust. And it's sort of similar with the teachers. So sort of like this idea that the pandemic will be sort of like a break, a paradigm shift. I don't see it. I don't see that happening in the Netherlands at the moment. It's more the other way around, actually. So how do you see that? And then again, so that was also one of the things we said, what's the way forward? And that's a big question, but maybe you could touch upon a little bit how you see that really shortly, because I was wondering how that works in Germany and also in England.
Maybe Ellie and John, do you like to start?
John can start.
Sorry, John.
I think the phrase that we've been using all the way through this is that we build back stronger, we build back better, that we as a union are stronger, we position ourselves as the voice of the profession, but also linked to our communities. We talk about how we've linked the demands of parents, the demands of learners, as well as our members. And we try to step that up. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be easy. I think these are small steps. I think the other thing we have to be prepared for is the next 2-3 years is going to be really, really tough. They're going to come for us. They're going to come for our members. They're going to come for our jobs. They're going to come for our services. And we've got to be ready to really fight. And as a movement, we aren't strong. But I think we have shown strength, and I think we are going to have to really step up, because this is, the other side are going to declare war on us, and we're going to have to be ready.
I completely want to echo what John has said, and I think right now we've got no power in government in terms of workers. So where the power is at is in trade union activism, and I think that this is not the time to take our foot off the brakes, and things are beginning to open up around the UK, and I think that people are fed up and are letting it happen despite the concerns of many, and I think that we need to be on the ball, holding the government to account at every single turn, and not letting go of those 20,000 members. I still can't get my head around it. That we have gained. And I think that our work as activists needs to lie in communication, and needs to lie in, and however that may be, but speaking to people, hearing their concerns and acting on them as a collective. And yeah, we can't stop now. We must strive forward and continue.
Thanks. Yeah, Lisa?
Yes, I totally agree. And I think what we also should do is that we have to focus on the things that now we can, and Ellie said it before, we can use the time and the things we talk about now, about the things which we see better now because of the crisis, that we take this and try to think about new concepts of education, to show schools, to show the university that we have to think about new ways of doing school, because the way how we did school before was not that good. It was really bad. So, and now the kids are the people who had to they are the losers now. Yeah? So they're not the winner of this crisis, and that's not good because they're our future. So we have to take this opportunity and to do something with this, and to show how we can develop education, how we can make our society better. And I also think that's important for a union, that especially for us, or maybe I can say this of my point of view, because how the GEW works is that now is the time where the youth can say, sorry, we said like a few years that we need to change how we work as a union, that we need to digitalize our union, that we need to try new things, because our younger members don't want to work like this. And now it's the time that we also can develop how our union works and how we organize the members. And I think that's a thing we don't have to forget and don't have to put by side. So, yeah, but it's a long and hard way, and we have to fight, and we need a lot of power and a lot of energy to get through this. But I think we can do it together.
It's also a "I told you so" moment for the union leadership, and yeah, it's right. You're absolutely right. Trudy, is there something like I think we're already at 9 o'clock, so we're running late, and I want to close it up. And again, I could do this the whole day, but we can't. So let's try to open up sort of like a conference sometime during the whole day with like unionists from around, education unionists from around the world. We'll get to that in a minute as well, by the way, when I'm ending up. But maybe Trudy, maybe you have something also to conclude what you learned, or also going forward, where we need to be going.
Well, I don't think there's a lot of new things to say after the very inspirational speakers we heard, because I think this is the moment where we can grab the momentum and try to try to implement changes. So we shouldn't let go of what we have achieved.
Yeah,
it's the teachers that did and the other education personnel that did their best in the schools. We did our best in the union to keep things going forward, to recruit new members. We shouldn't let go of it.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna finish off, and before I'm sort of like make my sort of like concluding remarks and what we're doing next, also for our members, I'd like to thank you very, very much in your free time during the evening, talking to a bunch of Dutch people and inspiring us. I think this is going to be watched. That's what we found out as well, that if we do these webinars, that they're being used quite often after the fact. So a lot of people will see this, and I'll send you the link as well so you can share it with your friends, networks, members, if they're interested in hearing from abroad as well. But thank you so much. And I think we'll definitely continue this conversation. And I hope we can connect our youth movements, our youth departments, our Groene Golf, our Green Wave, as we call them, with the Jonge GEW, and making those kind of connections. And also what your more, I think, younger activist network in London as well. So those kind of connections are, I think, very, very important, that we shouldn't lose focus on the international aspect, and that we're in this together globally. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I hope it works, and finish off also where we're heading. So this is like a call to action that people can share with teachers on the ground, and it says organiseer je op school en word actief in de AOB. And so organize your school and become active in your union. I think that's the most important message I'm getting from both from both your countries. We can learn a lot from that. We're very inspired by it. And what we're also going to do, and that's sort of like really, for us, a really inspiring thing. I know John and I participated in this. It's the Organizing for Power course that's starting in September to October. It's huge. It's going to hopefully involve tens of thousands of unionists, especially education unionists. It's going to be led by Jane McAlevey. And people can do this from their own school, get their own colleagues into it, maybe their own branch, de rayons bij ons. you can organize around it. So people who want to participate can on their own, but also through the union. And we're going to do this with the group and maybe get more people in there. It's very, very inspiring. Our colleagues from Los Angeles and Chicago, who are doing phenomenal work, are going to be part of it. And Jay McAlevey herself is like a phenomenal person to listen to. And I think we're going to continue discussion in our own union, how we can learn from the very inspirational examples you gave us. And let's move forward. En dus iedereen doet ook nog even het Nederlands. Nodig je collega's uit. We gaan dus in ieder geval één van de onderdelen die we gaan doen, dus is die grote cursus. Dat is misschien niet voor iedereen een stap, maar voor heel veel denk ik ook weer wel. Ook hele jonge collega's. Op een hele andere manier met de vakbond in aanraking te komen. En met tienduizenden andere leraren die ook hier aan mee gaan doen. En dat je dan op die manier je eigen school, je eigen collega's eromheen kan uitnodigen. En met een groep die cursus kan gaan volgen. En we moeten dat soort voorbeelden denk ik ook gaan doen. En dat is volgens mij ook wat de NEU heeft gedaan. Dus daarmee sluit ik het af. Heel erg bedankt voor het kijken. De link is openbaar, dus je kan terugkijken. Je kan het delen met je collega's. En ik hoop dat we dit soort bijeenkomsten vaker kunnen doen. En vaker van mensen kunnen leren. En ik hoop inderdaad dat ik zowel Lisa, Ellie en John nog een keer terug kan vragen om met ons samen te werken. En ik hoop dat jullie er net zoveel van geleerd hebben als ik. En ik wil ook nog even dan afsluiten met Trudy te bedanken, die heel veel werk hiervoor heeft verzet. En ook Philip, die dit weer helemaal technisch goed voor elkaar heeft gekregen. Fijne avond nog.
En Johan, bedankt.
Ja, dit is mijn hobby. Dus laten we gewoon bouwen aan een sterke vakbond. En ik denk dat we ook in daarbij ook nog een heel groot gevecht tegemoet gaan. Dank jullie wel. Fijne avond.